All right, so today on story number 278, story 278, we're going to look at Pilate orders Jesus to be crucified. All right, so now we're looking at this situation where, as we had talked about the whole, in the previous lessons, the whole step-by-step aspect that Jesus went through, knowing through his life that his ultimate goal was to be where he is. One thing sometimes that we can kind of get a little muddled is when we look at the crucifixion of Jesus, we look at it as though this shouldn't have happened. They shouldn't have allowed this to happen. And then when we feel like that, it's like, why couldn't somebody, they shouldn't have arrested him. They were lying on him and everything. But what we end up doing is having that sympathetic aspect of feeling like, couldn't we have done something different? Well, remember, what did Jesus pray in the garden? If there is what? Any other way. And was that prayer answered? No, because there was what? No other way. And then we'll find ourselves sometimes probably having that sympathetic feeling, and we can then identify with Peter. Remember when Jesus told Peter, I'm going to have to die? And Peter's like, no, you ain't got to die. And then Jesus had to tell Peter, get thee behind me, Satan. Because our human emotions and our human feelings be like, why should anybody have to go through this? That's how we would feel. But keeping in mind that Jesus is called the Lamb of God. And why was he called the Lamb of God? Because he was going to be what? He's going to be sacrificed. He's going to be slain. He's going to be our offering. We see that in way back in the book of Exodus with the original lamb that was slain for that dinner. That was a indication or a type of what Jesus was going to do. And that was called what? Passover. So now here in Jesus' day, the celebration of Passover is happening. And that foretelling throughout the centuries, throughout the millennium, of this payment for sin is now here. He's at the register, ready to pay. All right? And so we look at this, and one thing that we'll do today, I want to try to squeeze some of this in. I will look at a couple of Old Testament scriptures that point to that. Just in case I don't get to it, but Psalms 22 and Isaiah 53. And these were written, way before Jesus was born, before any of this was even thought of as to who this person was. But the Lord knew. And so what we'll see, the Lord allows us to have some time to do that.
What was that, Isaiah?
Isaiah 53 and Psalms 22. All right. So let's go through to our reading today, which is story 278. And let's take a look at this one. Let's take a listen. Pilate orders Jesus to be crucified.
Story 278. Pilate orders Jesus to be crucified. So then he delivered Jesus to them, to their will, to be crucified. So they took Jesus and led him away. They took his purple robe off him and put his garments on him, and they led him out to crucify him. And he went out, bearing his own cross. And when they led him away, as they were coming out, they laid hold of a man named Simon of Cyrene, a passerby coming in from the country, the father of Alexander and Rufus, whom they pressed into service to bear his cross, and placed the cross on him to carry behind Jesus. And following him, there was a great crowd of the people, and of women who were also mourning and lamenting him. But turning to them, Jesus said, Daughters of Jerusalem, stop weeping for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming when they will say, Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed. Then they will begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, Cover us. For if they do these things in the green tree, what will happen in the dry? And two others who were criminals were being led away to be put to death with him.
All right.
No, I'm just trying to slip this here so you can see.
Good morning. How you doing?
morning.
Yeah, give yourself some space. Slide the chair over so y'all don't have to be so crowded.
Yeah. Thank you.
You take that one, and I'll take this one.
Yeah, you got-
Thank
Don't
you.
worry about the gas.
Thank you.
You can sit on the gas.
See,
Thank you.
chivalry is not dead, huh? All right. So what we see today, as we look at this story, we see now that the payment has begun. Jesus has now been ordered to be what? Crucified. All right, and so he's being led away, and as we know, as he's going down to be crucified, there was this individual, Simon of Cyrene. He was from the country, and that was the country he's from. His father was named Alexander, and Rufus, his father and grandfather. So they knew this individual, and they probably knew him because after this event of him helping the cross, they probably got to know the disciples. It is said that Simon, because that area of Cyrene is in northern Africa, so it's deemed that he more than likely was a man of African descent. And I also find this interesting that the persecution of Jews and blacks. There's something just like, you talk to people, you listen to those folks in the Ku Klux Klan, and they don't like Jews and they don't like blacks. Now here we see in the crucifixion aspect, you see Jesus, who is who? Jewish. Which I also find ironic with the Ku Klux Klan, because they say they follow the Bible and they believe in Jesus and they say they're Christian, but they don't like Jews, but they call themselves following Jesus, who is a what? A Jew. So you can come to your own conclusions on that. That is a problem, even in just being
The
just
demonic,
common.
so they really twisted.
Exactly. That's the bottom line. But what you see here, and I don't know to what degree I will try to develop this, is something you can kind of take and develop it yourself in your own mind and in your own heart. But what is it with the black race and the Jewish that there is satanic and demonic hatred throughout the ages? And there's a lot we can do, and I could stop the study now, and we could spend a lot of time on that. But I'm just going to throw that out there, and leave that out there. Something that you can ponder in your own time when you're sitting in the car, sitting somewhere thinking. That's something you could just think about. What is this? What's going on with that? And you actually can pray about it. That's God that'll give you some insight. But the reality of it is that the devil don't like the things that the devil don't like. We know that God is what? Using. To what degree? Once again, we could talk about that. But let's move on. So there's this man named Simon, and he helps to carry the cross. And it says, and then when they get there, and it says at the place, the cross, they placed the cross on him, and there was people following behind him. And it just doesn't say that there was, people. It uses that word again that I like always pointing out. What it says, and there was a great crowd of people. Remember when we first started this, I said, keep an eye on the who? On the crowd. Look at how they are and where they are. Now, in the midst of the crowd, are there people that understand and wish this wasn't happening? Of course. It says there were a great crowd and women who were also mourning and lamenting. That means they were sad and sorrowful because of what was about to happen. Jesus is now being sent off to be put to death. And so they're sad and sorrow. All right? But Jesus is trying to get them to see what we pointed out earlier, that this is something that was already foretold. This had to happen. If there's going to be deliverance, I have to go through this. This is a terrible thing. Nobody wants to see somebody being beaten and whipped and punched and having thorns stuck in his head and all this kind of stuff. And now they're going to nail me to a cross. And no one wants to see this. But look at what he says to them. It says, but turning to them, Jesus said, daughters of Jerusalem, stop weeping for me. Now, that right there says a lot. we are human beings, and we identify, we sympathize, we empathize with other people's suffering. You ever watch one of these YouTube things where somebody like is doing something silly and they fall down kind of hard? You notice how your body goes, ooh, like you kind of cringe a little bit because you from just a identification aspect, you kind of almost feel, ooh, that must have hurt. Because that's what we do as human beings. If you don't have that ability, then that's sometimes people that don't know how to empathize are people that don't really care and that hurt people without even thinking about it. But when you have proper empathy for people, you don't want to see things happen to other people that you wouldn't want to see happen to you. And that's what's going on. But Jesus is telling them, don't weep for me. And you have to kind of look into that. He's like saying, all that he went through, I'm okay. I'm exactly where I need to be. With all that he went through. Now let's pause a moment and just do a little rehearsal here. He got slapped. He got spit upon. He had his beard pulled. Right? Right? And when you pulling beard, when you pulling a full beard, you ain't just pulling hair. You're also gonna pull some what? Some skin. Okay. They blindfolded him and punched him. I ain't talking about jabbing. I'm talking about punching. And what does that do to the face? You ever see a boxer after a fight? So y'all that are old enough, y'all remember Joe Frazier's fight after he got finished with Muhammad Ali? Right? You're not looking to normal, are you? Then they take him out and they scourge him with their whip with 9 straps on it that have bone and metal and glass tied into it. And a lot of people under scourging would actually die because they just couldn't take the pain. So he has that happen, and then they mock him. They put the thorns on his crowns on his head, and they're beating him again, and they're kicking him and all that kind of stuff. But he's saying, and now they got him carrying his cross. It was, and plus he hasn't slept all night. They kept him up all night with these. So when you look at this that he's going through, and this is still just the beginning. He's not even on the cross yet. And he's carrying the cross, and his physical body is falling under the weight of it. And then they call Simon to help him bear it. And with all of that, he says to them, don't weep for me. Because this is where I need to be. But then he goes on and he tells them, he said, daughters of Jerusalem, stop weeping for me, but weep for yourselves. See, you are the ones that are going through more torment than I am. See, what we're going through, he's going through this in the what? In the flesh, in the natural. He's also going to go through it in the spiritual when he gets on the cross, when the Father puts on him the weight of sin, and the Father has to do what? Turn his back. And he's going to have spiritual stuff that we're going to kind of look at a little bit here when we go into these Old Testament readings. He said, read for yourselves and for your children. Okay? He says, for behold, the days are coming when they will say, blessed are the barren. Why am I saying blessed are the barren? Because you don't have to worry about trying to raise kids. Because it's what? Too hard. It's too. The world has made it too difficult. What else? And the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed. Someone that didn't. If you didn't have to raise children, then bless. Now I won't say that we are totally there now, but we are very close, because a lot of people they don't want to have kids because it's too difficult. There used to be a time back in the day when children were a huge blessing, because they were there to be part of the family, and they helped, and they were extra hands and extra minds, extra input that you could use. And the bigger the family, the more blessed it was. That's why God said, be fruitful and what? And multiply. And so Satan has tweaked the world. So if you want to be blessed, you probably don't want to multiply. You know, because if you want to have all your money to yourself, you probably don't want to have no children. If you don't want to have to share and I want to do everything I want to do, then you probably what? Don't want to have kids because they're going to do what? They're going to pull on you a little bit. But one thing I will say is the children do one thing and they will mature you. There's a guy at my job, he was talking about how he has OCD a little bit. And he says he likes things in a certain place. He goes, I'm not crazy about, like off, but he says, I just like things in the right place. And so me and another guy on the job was like, oh yeah, we all been like that to a certain degree. I don't think there's anything wrong with you. Everybody like to have things in a certain place, but you get rid of that when you have kids. See, he didn't have any children. Both of us had multiple children. I said, oh yeah, when you have kids, you put something somewhere, they're gonna move it and everything. You come in, you straighten your house up, they come in, they change it different ways, and kids you get cured of OCD quick. You have some children. All right, it's done. You don't need no medication, no psychiatrist, no nothing. You just need a child or two, and really you need like two. All right, because if you got one and stuff is messed up, you know who did it. Right. But if you got two, it's like, okay, now which one of y'all? All right. So there's a lot of things that happen. So Jesus is saying the day will come when people are going to be like, I don't want no children. Well, we almost there now. Right? We could talk about people not having children and people that get pregnant and they have the abortions because I don't want the children. I don't want the weight of it. All right. And so he goes on and says, then they will begin to say to the mountains, what? Fall on us. All right. So when we went through the book of Revelation, we saw that. There's going to come a time when the people in the world are going to look at what's going on, and they will say, I wish I could find a mountain to fall on me. To what degree? To cover me, to hide me. To hide you from what? From what the Lord will bring. So what he's saying is, when you see me going through this, there's going to be greater condemnation coming to the world. All right? And then he says, keep this in mind. For if they do this thing to the green tree, speaking of himself, what will they do to the dry? Speaking of thus that we try to follow him and so forth. All right? And there were two others also who were criminals, which were led away and put to death with him. So that means he wasn't. This was a day when there wasn't just one person being condemned; there was two others. So he's there now. He's at that point. He's about ready to be nailed to the cross. All right. Now we talked about how this is not something that is a bad thing, though it's bad things happening, but it equates to something that is glorious and that is going to give us deliverance. What I want to do is kind of look at a few Old Testament scriptures, and once again we could spend 4 or 5 sessions going through all the various scriptures in the Bible that point to this, but I think if we just kind of highlight 2. Because in reality, there isn't any single book in the Bible that doesn't, to some degree, point to the life, the death, and burial of resurrection of Jesus. I might. Yep. There we go. All right. So, I'm going to turn to Psalms 22, and I'm just going to read this. All right. You can just take a listen here, and I'm going to emphasize some words here as I go through it. All right. So
Psalms, what was that song?
Psalms 22, and so tell me if you from your own understanding of remembering and hearing the crucifixion event of Jesus, which we haven't actually got to yet, but I want to get this here first. If this sounds familiar to you, Psalms 22 opens up, my God, why hast thou what? Forsaken me. Jesus is going to say that on the cross, isn't he? Why art thou so far from helping me, and from the words of my wrong? So what this says is that even though Jesus is saying that you don't, not to weep for me, but he's not saying don't weep for me because this doesn't hurt or I don't feel the pain. He feels it. but he's going to do it anyway. And see, we pointed this out once before, that you remember when Jesus was, after his resurrection, and you remember when he appeared to the apostles the first time, who was not there? Thomas. And then they told Thomas, Jesus appeared. He's alive. Thomas said, I will not believe it unless I do what?
See the whole.
I want to see the nail prints in his hands and the spear in his what? In his side. So later on, when they're gathered again, when Thomas is there, guess who shows up? Jesus. And somehow or another, Jesus knew what Thomas had said. And he said, Thomas, believe. He said, come, put your hands through the holes in my hand. Put your finger into the hole on my side. Now, this was the resurrected Jesus that still had the nail prints in his what? In his hands. All right. One thing that we often forget when we see that, we think, okay, well, yeah, he got healed of everything except for the nail prints and the spear. Well, the Bible doesn't say that. The Bible tells us that he still bears the scars. The scriptures even tell us that Isaiah points out and says that he was marred, that he didn't even look like a human. And when he appeared to them on the seaside, Peter said that, well, we didn't even desire to ask him, is a Jew? Because he didn't really look like himself. But he said, but we knew it was him. So when you think about it, in his natural form, in eternity, forever, he's carrying the receipt that he paid. I got the receipt. I paid for the sins of man. You want to see the receipt? And then he shows him his natural self. Now, I think that he has the ability to be different. So he can show you the glory. Remember when he was telling the Father, Lord, glorify me with the glory that I had before. So he can then what? Be glorious. But then when you say, but are you human? He can be, well, I'm 100% human. But then when he turns to be 100% human, as he did to show himself to Thomas, the punches that were in his face. See, if the nail prints didn't heal, why would the swelling heal? If the bruises, if the spears in his side didn't heal, why would the swelling of the head with the thorns? All right? The beard, the skin, that's still ripped. He's going to carry that for eternity. That's the receipt. And this is what we're seeing here. That is what paid for us. Now, when we go to heaven, we're going to be, our natural body's going to be what? Changed. In the moment, in the twinkling of an eye. You got bad feet, bad elbows, bad neck, sore back, whatever. All that is gone. You're gonna be walking around in your glorified body, just as wow. No Mars, no scuffs. Everything looking wonderful, perfect, glorious. But Jesus was, in his natural aspect, will still have the payment of sin on him. Yes, sir.
I'm hearing all this stuff you're saying, all this good stuff that you're saying about you're going to have this glorious body and you're not going to have this pain. But now, we must do something to get that. And he's showing us what we got to come out of. We got to come out of something to get all of this. Mm-hmm. And that is sin. Mm-hmm. And we cannot linger and play with sin and thinking we're going to get this. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of people thinking, well, I'm going to get this. Well, Jesus suffered for you to get it, but now you got to do something in order to get it too.
Mm-hmm. You have to
it's
connect
like
with Jesus.
You know, and I think that we need to know that, that, you know, the price was paid, but you got to go up to the register to get your stuff. You can't just sit there and say, well, he said I can get it. It's just going to drop in my arm.
No.
You gotta get up and you gotta do something.
No, you have to accept it.
Acknowledge and have faith.
Yep.
You have to go through.
You have to want it. If you don't want it, he says, if you come to me, I will in no wise what? Cast you out. So you have to want it. You have to walk up there and just in your own will and say, Lord, I want what you're offering. And if you want it, then you'll get it. But let's keep going. Psalms 22. We're looking at this, right? And it says, "Oh my God, I cry in the daytime, but thou hearest not." All right. All right. So he cried and asked God, if it's possible, can this pass from me? All right. He cried that earlier. And what happened? The Father said no. So it's not that that hearest not is basically saying that prayer was what? Not answered. And in the night season, and I am not silent, but thou art holy, O thou inhabitant of the praises of Israel. Our father trusted in thee. They trusted, and thou didst deliver them. Who's the deliverer? Jesus. All right. He's an example of the final deliverance. But when we go through the Old Testament, we're going to see how many times the Lord delivers the nation of Israel from all kinds of what? Oppression. We'll see it from Israel and from the Philistines and so forth and so on. It says, they cried unto thee and were delivered. They trusted in thee and they were not confounded. But I am a worm and no man. See, this is speaking about his being reduced. How he's like, I'm looked upon and beaten to the point to where I have no value. See, back in slavery, the African slave had no human aspect. You were not looked at as a man. All right, and so Jesus is saying
the Constitution of the United States says that we are 3/5 human.
3/5, exactly. All right, and so they're looking at Jesus as though they're not treating him like a true human being. The reproach of men, despise of the people. That crowd is there. All they that see me laugh. And, all right, and so when we get there, we're going to see they're going to do what? Continue to what? Mock him. They scorn me. They shout out their lips. They shake their heads, saying, he trusted in the Lord, that he would deliver him. Let him deliver him. See if he delighted in him. Right? So they're going to continue to what? Mock him. But thou art he that took me out of the womb. In other words, Jesus came as a what? As a human being. Thou didst make me hope. Jesus knew that he was going to go through this, but he was doing this to be the hope of what? All humanity. All right. And he goes on, he says, when I was upon my mother's breast, I was cast upon thee from the womb, and thou art my God from my mother's belly. Be not far from me, for trouble is near. All right. Now, when he's talking about trouble is near, he's not only talking about what he's going through from the scourging and the persecution, but he's also dealing with a spiritual battle. And we'll see this in a minute here. All right. All right. And when he says trouble is near, it's not just Pilate. It's not just the religious leaders of that day that hate him and want him dead. This is also a spiritual battle. All right. So he's going to use an allegory here to point to that. And he says trouble is near, for there is none to help. So he's doing this how? By himself. He's alone. But if there was anyone to help, it wouldn't have been God delivering us. It had to be God by himself. There's none to help. And look what it says in verse 12. Many bulls have compassed me. All right. Now, when we go through this reading here, do you ever remember in all your studying of the scriptures and the crucifixion of Jesus, do you ever remember Jesus or anybody pointing out that there's bulls walking around?
No.
You don't see that. So then what is this? Well, when you think about what he's saying here, he's saying, I need help because there are, and he just didn't say there's bulls. He said there are many bulls are compassed me. Oftentimes, and we see this, we'll see this when we get into the book of Daniel, and we saw this when we were in the book of Revelation, that spiritual entities are often described in animal gestures or animal form. Right? And so when he talks about these many bulls, and there's another spot where he talks about the bulls of about to mispronounce the town. But anyway, he talks about these bulls of it'll come to me later. But anyway.
I believe the bull is making a reference, in fact, it's an allegory, I believe. And it's not talking about a literal physical bull,
No.
but a human being with the personality or perhaps even the characteristics of a bull. Because, I mean, we refer to bullish on America or bullish on Wall Street, or bullish is kind of like a reference to someone's nature.
Mm-hmm. Well, I definitely think it can apply to that. But what I see here is that it's talking about not only the taunts of humans, but the taunt of the demonic world. Remember that he's fighting a spiritual battle too. When Jesus went into the wilderness and he fasted for how many days? 40 days. Who went in there with him?
Satan.
Is Satan a natural human being? Satan went in the wilderness in the what? In the spirit. And and it says, and he left him after Jesus put him down 3 times. That he left him for a what? A season. Satan's back. And so this bull speaks of, yes, a personality, but not just a human personality, demonic personality. So what we don't see on the cross, we saw the tainting and the taunting that he gets, but we often don't see what kind of taunting and what kind of pull is happening in the spiritual realm. We often forget about that. All right. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. Here it is. It's actually right here in here, this town I was looking at. And it says, for many bulls have compassed me, strong bulls of Bashan, all right, have besieged me around. All right, so that's the town I was trying to remember. If I would have kept reading, I would have really told me itself. But it's pointing to this aspect of these bulls that have surrounded him. They grasp upon me with their mouths. You see that? As ravening and roaring lions. So once again, there's another description. So are they bulls or are they lions? They're both.
But this is all demonic.
It's all demonic. It's all demonic stuff. I am poured out like water. All right. When he is stuck in the side, what comes out? Blood and water. And all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. And there's a very interesting guy that was a doctor that talked about how when you go through this crucifixion, how the heart begins to change its fleshy form, and you just have to read it. If you go on the internet and go the physical aspects of Jesus' crucifixion, you can actually see this doctor who wrote this paper on this, or what happens to the human body when it goes through what Jesus went through. Interesting reading. It is melted in the midst of my bowels. My strength is dried up. We know he didn't have strength because he couldn't even carry the what? The cross up there. Like the pottish herd, and my tongue cleaveth to my jaw. All right. So even his ability to talk was hard. Thou broughtest me into the dust of death. The dust of death. So he's right there. For dogs have compassed me. There's another description. So we said bulls, lions, and now what? Dogs. All right. So he's using these animal figures, and we're going to see this a lot when we go into the Old Testament, and we'll see it. When Aaron made a false god, he made it in the shape of what? A bull. The false god. A calf.
A calf.
The golden calf.
Yeah, the golden calf.
They didn't make the false god look like another man. They made it look like an animal. But we're going to worship. This is going to be our spiritual leader. And so you see those allegories a lot as you go through Scripture. It says, "For dogs have compassed me about; they assemble the assembly of the wicked have enclosed me. They have pierced my hands and my feet. Mm-hmm. They make me tell. I may tell all my bones. They look at satyrs upon me." All right. They part my garments among them. All right. They're going to do what? Take the garment and do what? They cast lots upon my vesture. "But be not thou far from me, O Lord. O my strength, hasten thee to help me. Deliver my soul from the sword, my darling from the power of the what? Of the dogs. Save me from the what? From the lion's mouth." All right. And I'm going to skip down a little bit because I'm looking at my time here because I got another one I want to read too. But he goes on, and you'll see here where he talks about in verse 25. It says, "My praise shall be of thee in the great congregation." So he's saying that he's going to be what? In the congregation. If you skip down to 28, it says, "For the kingdom is the Lord's, and he is the governor among the nations." All right. And so he will be what? He will definitely rule. All right. And there's so much to this, and I can spend a lot of time when we go through the Old Testament and get to this point. We'll spend even more time with that. But I wanted to also just skip over a little bit and go to Isaiah 53, and I'll kind of skim through this a little bit. And it goes, "Who has believed our report? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed?" Who has the strength of the Lord been revealed? So who's believed the report of Jesus? All right. Who's believed it? There's a lot of people that believe it, but a lot of people that what? Don't believe it. All right. And so if you go down to verse 3, it says, "And he was despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrow and acquainted with grief." What is he going through? Grief. "And we hid ourselves, as it were, our face from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he hath borne our grief and carried our sorrows. Yet he did not esteem him stricken, and smitten of God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions, and he was bruised for our iniquity." That wounding and that bruise is what we talked about, that he will carry in the natural for eternity. "He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. All we are like sheep gone astray. We are turned every one to his own way, and the Lord have laid on him the iniquity of us all." See that? "He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He was brought as a lamb to the slaughter." This is Isaiah. "And as a sheep before the shearers dumb, so he opened not his mouth. He was taken from prison and from judgment. And who shall declare this generation?" Who's going to talk about this? Who's going to share this information? That's why we're here. All right. All right. It says verse 9 says he made his grave with the wicked. We talked about he's being crucified with what? 2 thieves. And with a rich in his death. But he's not going to be. He's put to death with the wicked, the 2 thieves. But he's going to be buried in the grave of a what? Of a rich man. We're going to see that. "Because he had done no violence, neither any deceit was in his mouth. Yet it pleased the Lord to bruise him." Right? You see that you can't get any more important thing. This is why Jesus told the women of Jerusalem, "Don't weep for me." This is what needs to be happening here. I'm where I need to be. it pleased the Lord to bruise him. He hath put him to grief. When thou shalt make his soul an offering for sin. All right. Once again, I can go through a lot of this, but I just wanted to give you a flavor and a taste for what the Old Testament talks about when it talks about Jesus' death. This is why Jesus is telling these individuals, these daughters of Jerusalem, don't weep for me. This is why Jesus told Peter, when Peter said, you don't have to die. He said, get thee behind me, Satan. I have to fulfill Scripture. And all this was prophesied. And more than just what I read. It's full of this. It's all in there. So Jesus is right where he said he needs to be. I'm going to pay for sin. And this is what he's about to do. All right. Any comments or questions on that? All right. Let's see. All right. Let's look at our next one here. The crucifixion. All right. And we're going to touch on this. This is significant. Story 279.
Story 279, the Crucifixion. And when they had come, they brought him to the place which is called in Hebrew, Golgotha, which is translated, the place of a skull. There they crucified him. But Jesus was saying, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. And they tried to give him wine to drink, mixed with gall, and mixed with myrrh. But after tasting it, he was unwilling to drink. He did not take it. And when they had crucified Jesus, the soldiers therefore divided up his garments, and made 4 parts among themselves, a part for every soldier, casting lots for them to decide what each should take, and also the tunic. Now the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece. Therefore they said to one another, Let us not tear it, but cast lots for it, to decide whose it will be, that the scripture might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet. They divided my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. Therefore the soldiers did these things, and sitting down, they began to keep watch over him there. And it was the 3rd hour when they crucified him. And at that time they crucified 2 other men with him, thieves, criminals, one there on his right, and one there on his left, and Jesus in between. And the scripture was fulfilled which says, And he was numbered with transgressors.
All right. Well, we see now he has been brought to the cross, and he's been put on the cross. Now, when we watch the movies, I don't know if you watched the Mel Gibson's The Passion of Christ, or you watch Jesus of Nazareth, and different ones. They go through in dramatic form of the whole aspect of him having the nails. They usually kind of make that a dramatic aspect with it. The hammer's coming down on the nail one is on, and you kind of like. Right? I mean, you can see the scripture just says he was crucified, right? But we know what happened. So certain words, sometimes you read the word and you go on to the next word, but sometimes you should stop and pause. That's an important aspect, really, of any reading, but especially the Bible. You read a word, stop, and then think about that word. What does that entail? It's like if I say I'm going to drive up to Syracuse, it took me 2 seconds to say that. But then if you sit, well, let's think about that. All right, that's a 3.5 hour ride. You got to decide which way you want to go. You want to go up through the highway. You're going to take you got your gas. Well, how are you going to get back? Come back the same day. Why is it significant? Because it requires a lot of thinking and processing. But it don't take a whole lot to say it.
Say it.
Right? So when you say he was crucified, you can just walk past that word and go on to the next one. But you should stop and pause. Yes, Mother.
It will help also if you have a dictionary somewhere nearby, because the Bible, as we all know, is composed of words. And where do you find the definitions and interpretations and meanings of words? In dictionaries.
Mhm.
That will help greatly.
Mhm. That is so true. You need to have the understanding, and it's the historical aspects, where where did those words come from, where did it originate from. Those help. So when we look at this, and it says, and when they had come, they brought him to the place which is called in Hebrew Golgotha. All right, so this is where he was crucified, which is also translated and called the place of the what? Of the skull. People that have gone there, I haven't gone there, that traveled there, said that when you look upon that hill, it kind of looks like you can see two eyes and a nose and a mouth. That's why they call it the skull, because it just happens to have that look about it. All right. I think that's kind of ominous. We can spend some time thinking about, some of the things that do they mean anything, or is it just a coincidence? But that's for another discussion. It says, and there they crucified him. All right. So now you can just read that and move on. But that tells you right there. There, they took his hands and nailed it to the what? To the cross. They took his feet and put them together and nailed them to the cross. All right. They lifted him up and plotted him in that hole where the wood would go to keep it upright. All that happened in that. There they crucified him. All right. So we even though we're going to the next phrase, you have to make sure you understand what that all entailed. That was a moment right there, and the women that were there watching that, they're watching him, putting that spike, near his arm and wrist and hand, and then taking that big old hammer and just pushing it through. And then going to the other hand and doing the same thing. And then going to his feet and placing them there, and then putting them together and nailing it right through. But Jesus told us not to what? Weep for him. He said, y'all are in more danger than I am. This is what I came to do. It's amazing, isn't it? It says, but Jesus was saying, look at what's happening. While he is being nailed to the cross, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing. This is what Jesus came to do, to bring forth what? Forgiveness. This can happen. You mean those guys that were actually had the spike in their hands, and there's a possibility that they could be saved? Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so the Lord, while he's being crucified, telling the Father to forgive these individuals that are crucifying me. Why? Because they know not what they do.
It's just like today. We have to bring all of this, into perspective here. There are a lot of people out there who do evil and they do bad things to you. They get in your life, or you work with them, and you're trying to communicate with them. It's like, say, a boss on a job. I mean, you're saying, look, I've got enough, just give me an hour or two. And they're like, no, I want it like yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
and you just feel so oppressed. But the best thing to say in your own mind is, the same thing that the Lord said. They don't realize, the damage and the hurt and the harm that they're doing to others,
Mm-hmm.
because they're not mentally, spiritually, intellectually raised, from their grave, their spiritual grave,
Mhm.
to understand
Mhm.
really and exercise empathy to what's happening to someone else.
Exactly. And that ability to empathize is important. It's a very important human characteristic.
Yes.
All right. So Jesus is saying, Lord, just Father, forgive them. All right. And when it says they don't know what they're doing, it emphasizes ignorance. How many things have been done to harm other people under the umbrella of ignorance? It's just not knowing, not having any familiarity with what the consequences of your actions actually portray, what they're going to
We
happen.
can look at that right now. Look at the television, what's going on.
Mhm.
People are blaming the president, for his rhetoric, I mean, everything's going off. I mean,
Mhm.
people are like, somebody went into a synagogue in Pittsburgh and shot up 11 people.
Mhm.
I mean, insanity is taking place all over the place, and people are saying, well, don't you think you should be responsible for some of this, hate speech and the
Mhm.
activities that are taking place? And the answer is yes.
Mhm.
The answer is yes, you're responsible for what you say. And words can kill.
Mhm. That's right. That's right. They can kill, and they can also what? Give
Make
life.
lives.
Mhm. And that's one thing that we should always keep in mind. Be careful what you hear, because what you hear, you can allow to come into you. All right? Because the Bible doesn't say by seeing. Faith cometh by seeing. Faith cometh by what? Hearing. So what you allow into your being, what you hear, what you pay attention to, will mold you. And if you let a lot of what we hear today come in, it will begin to make a difference. It changes you. And so that's why you got to make sure that you're putting into you what you need. You take in good vegetables and minerals, and it will change you in a way. But if you take in, junk food all the time, that's going to do what? Change you. Same thing spiritually. What you put in will help to mold you. And it says, and they tried to give him wine to drink, mixed with gall and mixed with myrrh. But after tasting it, he was unwilling to drink it. He did not take it. All right. So they looked to give him something, but one of the things that he noticed when he tasted it, that it had some that myrrh, and that the wine had some ability to deaden some of the pain, which Jesus did not want. I can't go through this with any aid. I don't need any help. I have to bear this myself. So he would not take it. I don't need a painkiller. I need to feel it. Because as Isaiah said, that by his stripes we are what? Healed. His affliction brings our healing. So the fact that he went through that, he wanted to go through it completely. It says, and when they had crucified him, I mean, they done finished nailing him to the cross, and he's lifted up, all right? So now he's up there. The soldiers therefore divided up his garments. Now we need to stop there, all right? Because oftentimes the King James is polite, and actually any version of the Bible, NIV, ESV, any of them, they're all polite, and that it doesn't actually tell us he was on that cross naked. They took his garments off. They didn't say, well, we're going to have a little modesty. We don't want him to be that embarrassed. They didn't care nothing about him being embarrassed. So there was no modesty. There was no correction. They had him there, and he's standing there with the shame. Right? That whole aspect. That's one of the things that they did when they used to sell slaves. They used to strip them. There's no humanity, no sense of having any type of human aspect, and that's what that speaks of. And then not only are we going to strip him, all right, of his garment, but we're also going to do what? We're going to take that first garment and we're going to tear it into 4 pieces, because back then fabric was valuable. It took time. You didn't go to Walmart and just buy fabric. You had to, most of the time you made it what? You had to make it yourself. So they said, well, this man is dying, and so these soldiers are looking, well, what am I going to get for it? I'm getting paid already my salary, but I'm going to get a little extra perk today. I'm taking this garment. And so they divided up into 4 parts, and they cast lots. They gambled for it. All right? For them, they cast lots for them to decide what each should take. And also the tunic. Now the tunic was a seamless woven into one piece. So now this one they didn't what? They didn't rip, because it was all just one piece. And that one they also gambled for. Therefore they said to one another, let us not tear it, but let us cast lots for it to decide whose it will be. All right? That the scripture might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet. They divided my garment among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. So we read that in Psalms 22. Therefore the soldiers did these things, and sitting down they began to watch over him there. And it was about the what? The third hour. All right. So their day starts at what time in the morning? 6 in the morning.
6.
So the third hour means is what? 9 in the morning. All right. Keep that in mind so we can get an idea as to what time it is. And at that time, they crucified 2 other men with him. What kind of men? Thieves, criminals. Okay. One on his right hand and the other on his left. And Jesus in between. And the scripture was fulfilled, which says, and he was numbered with transgressors. Right? So he's being, and that was, once again was in Isaiah 53:12. So he's being put there with other criminals. There are people there that deserve to be there based on that law, because they were criminals. Jesus was not a criminal. Jesus was lied upon. He was put there because of envy and malice and hate by the religious leaders of that day. But at the same time, he was really put there by what? His love for us. That's the real reason why he's there. Because he loves us and he cares for us. We're just going to have to pause because there's so much more that we're going to see as we go through this whole aspect of his crucifixion. But understanding that he's there on the cross because of you and me. Because he cares for us. If he didn't care for us, we'd be paying the penalty of sin, which is what? Wages of sin is death.
And
So-
if we don't accept him, we still would be paying.
You gotta
We
pay.
don't pay for sin.
You have to want the payment. You gotta want the fact. Yes, I agree. You have to agree with God. I agree that your payment pays for my sin. Now, if you want to pay for it yourself,
You can.
you can try, but you're not going to get the reward. See, what Jesus purchased for us brings us into the presence of God. You don't want to know what your purchase can produce for you. Right? You ain't going to get a whole lot. In fact, you're not going to want what you get.
That's that rich man.
You're not going to want it. So we'll stop here and we'll